Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to Self-Management USA today on August 11th, 2026. I am Dom. I'm going to introduce my community partner, Kat Higgins, and then we'll kick it off. Kat is an executive consultant and self-management enthusiast who has led transformations at Fortune 50s in finance, tech, and managed services. She's a tireless proponent for equity and has no limits to the scope of her vision. She currently lives in South Bend, Indiana. I think that's still true as of today.
Yes.
Yes, near her two children and her pup, Cookie.
Hey, who's actually here in Lansing with me. And Dom is my partner. We both co-founded Self-Management USA. It's almost exactly 1 year. We'll be 1 year next month. Dom's a curious-minded go-getter who drives innovation transformations in the agile, tech, financial, and broad industry applied spaces. Dom is a forward thinker, an empath with a passion for servant leadership and making work better. He's a father, a husband, a friend extraordinaire who lives in Charlotte, he just mentioned. And he's an expert chaos coordinator with a PhD in GSD.
Thanks very much, Kat. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining Self-Management USA. So this is a group where we all learn about anything self-management, anything teal, Holacracy, or generally self-management in nature. Here is the agenda that we have for today. We have a very, very exciting session. We are going to have a speaker for the first half. It's going to be today. It's going to be a little bit of a question and answer. During this discussion, you're free to challenge views with curiosity. Please put questions in chat if someone is speaking. And when you're talking, try to limit it to about 90 seconds so we can just make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk.
Just hit the raised hand function, and then we'll have a nice little queue of people to be able to ask questions.
Yeah. And we're here to further the understanding of self-management in the USA. We have a lot of ways for you to stay connected. I'm going to drop those right now into the chat. So we'd love to stay connected with you all on LinkedIn and in our future calls, which we are going to be going over. After today, we do have a September 15th with Matt Spar going over the 2026 Teal Landscape Report. And then we're working right now on our Q4 schedule as we speak.
Oh, let me just add to that really quick. So two things we're trying to aim for on our Q4 schedule. They're not confirmed yet, but just to put out some feelers, and we'd love your feedback if there's anything else you'd like us to try and pursue, because we're pretty good at knocking on doors and saying, hey, will you join us? One of them is a panel of people who can talk about different ownership types like ESOPs, employee trust, or what was the other one? Stewardship. So we're looking for people in those sources to talk about different ways that you can own and manage companies that can involve self-management. And the other one that we're looking at is the man who brought Scrum to Tesla, to try and see how some of those self-managing facilitation principles can apply to big manufacturing industries.
Yeah, so if you have any names that you think fulfill that, we'd love to hear about it.
Or topics. Yep.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. But without further ado, I'm excited to welcome our volunteer speaker today. We'd like to give them the undivided stage. So I'm proud to introduce Brian Robertson. The topic today is what happens when you go all the way and remove traditional management altogether. Brian Robertson created one of the world's best-known self-management systems, Holacracy, and spent 15 years evolving it, and has now stepped back from running the organization he built. Join us for a candid conversation about what actually replaces the boss, how decisions get made, and what the self-management movement looks like from where he's standing now. A little bit about Brian. He is the creator of Holacracy, the most widely adopted framework for running self-managed companies using a decentralized power structure. He founded HolacracyOne and GlassFrog, and is the author of Holacracy, the new management system for a rapidly changing world. His work has reached tens of thousands of organizations across more than 50 countries. So please join me in welcoming Brian to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hey, did you want to do any introduction, or you want to just get started and we'll knock on the...
No, I'll go with yours, and you guys will get to know me by a dialogue. How about that?
Great, sounds good. So again, if anyone else has questions, you can just hit the raised hand function, and we'll call on you in order. So question number one, you spent 15 years running Holacracy, and now you step back. So what surprised you the most when you did let go?
Yeah. It was probably a combination of how much spiritual work was involved. And by spiritual work, I mean the work of noticing our attachments and releasing them. Noticing I mean, it's kind of like raising a kid, right? Like you spend all these years where, it's your job to make sure they're healthy and, kind of grow up to express their highest potential and keep them safe and all that stuff. And, there's a diligence to that. But then they go off to school and, then and somewhere in between there, it's not a binary. As they age, there's like a letting go process of like, oh, wait, no, it's not my job to control this anymore. It's not my job to worry about this. It's a very similar process of, like the kid going off to college, as I've exited, and it's not the first company that I've had to go through this with, but certainly the one that I was, most like deeply identified with. There's identity structures build and grow as we get deep into something, especially for 15 years. So there's a lot of the spiritual work of just noticing when there was like a contraction and a desire to control or to still lead in some way, some part of it. And then constantly doing the work of like releasing that, noticing it, holding it, letting it go. While still being in full discernment of sometimes there are things that actually it would serve for me to jump in and get involved. It would serve the entity, it would serve me. So, being in that discernment without just a complete cut, I think it's probably a lot easier when people just sell their company and leave. It's kind of, there's no opportunity anymore. And I didn't do that path. I'm still on the board and still have an investment stake in the company. So it was more of a gradual releasing and letting go. And then the other side of it was just how rewarding that would be. As much as I love Holacracy, it's a beautiful framework. I love the organization, we built, and it's in very capable hands now with a colleague of mine who's, taken on most of the things I used to do. And the reward has been great. It freed up so much energy and brain space, even more than I realized it would, to focus on everything next for me. And it's been quite a beautiful and rewarding process and challenging at times.
Let me pull that string. Maybe it'd be good to set the context of you're not 100% not involved. You're not 100% involved. What is the constraint? What is it that you still continue to do? And what do you no longer do in your current role?
Yeah, so I have a board level role. I mean, one of the nice things about Holacracy is it does a really good job of evolving and defining what are the specific roles that you're still involved with. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. It can be I'm releasing these 10 roles, but I'm going to keep these 2 or whatever. And that's very much what I did. So I'm still I have some board roles involved. There's a financial steward role that handles some just really high level board level financial stuff, does some stuff with our tax returns. I'm still involved with some of the tax prep and stuff like that as well. Investment decisions, we have some investments, things like that. And a legal foundation role that is, again, kind of a high level, just real basics of some legal work for the organization. And then beyond that, a spokesperson role. So I'm here, doing some talking, public speaking. I do some of that stuff.
We're glad.
Yeah. So I've got a few roles left, but none of them are like operational, like day-to-day management and leadership stuff. It's more, I can completely ignore the organization for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and just respond when a colleague calls and needs something or whatever.
Nice. Well, we're glad you're still in that role. I saw a question in the chat, but it's a little easier for us as we're facilitating if you hit the raised hand, and then we can see what order they came in. But I believe it was Peter. Peter, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah. So Brian, I believe we met at a Conscious Capitalism conference a million years ago. And I'm just curious, looking back, if you had a chance to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Yeah, it's always a tough question, in that nothing is my default answer. Not because I don't see plenty of opportunities and learnings and all that along the way, but just a general stance of how I want to relate to the past. We can't change it, so I want to see the beauty in everything that's gotten us to here, to now. And So I'd have a different answer if you asked, what were the key learnings that you might do differently next time. But as far as the past, it was exactly what it needed to be to get me here for sure. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's so many things. It's hard to even pick one or a theme. 15 years is a long time. I was pretty young when I started the organization as well. I must have been in my late 20s when I started HolacracyOne. Now, God, that was actually 20 years ago, so I'm in my late 40s now. Lots changed, lots learned. I think a lot of it is, Holacracy itself evolved, and Holacracy's evolution in some ways paralleled my own. It was, it was 20 years ago. I was so attached to my organization, so like it was my baby. I wanted to build this thing and what I was doing. And it's interesting to be, building a self-managing organization from it's very typical of founders. It's not unusual. It's just, what happens with especially good founders. They do often go in with a lot of attachment. There's something they are passionate about and they want to build, I have learned over decades how to, really let the leadership flow without the attachment, the needy, oh, I got to do this, or something's wrong or bad or off, and so I hold things so much lighter now, so much, there's, and this is one of the challenges, I think in the self-management world, it can be easy to use self-management as kind of just a let go, and that's actually terrible advice when former bosses try to go into self-management and they just stop doing things. They just say, well, now everybody's doing this or whatever. The organizations suffer. There's still unique gifts that those people are usually providing, but at the same time, if you're providing them from still this level of a felt need to control it because you're kind of all wrapped up and identified with it, then that doesn't leave as much room for other people's leadership, even in a self-managed system. So there's kind of this finding a way to really still hold power and leadership and allow things to flow in a way that is just held without the tight grip, held looser and more as play. When I started, this was it was serious for me. Now with a lot of just spiritual growth, a lot of what I do now is just play. It's but like playing a game, that doesn't preclude playing hard. It doesn't preclude being fully in. I enjoy playing a game and kind of intentionally getting intensely into it and really going for whatever the goals of the game are. But I don't lose track of the fact that it's just a game. It doesn't matter. The outcome really isn't the point. The point is there joy and flow and ease and beauty in the process itself. I think the biggest delta for me has been that learning of how to still allow the fun of chasing a goal and playing to win and playing intensely, but with the spirit and attitude of, and it doesn't matter. I don't care whether it succeeds or fails. I'm just playing. That integration has been probably the biggest shift in what I am bringing in now to the things I'm doing now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Brian, thank you very much. I think I had a question. I think you partially answered, but what is the biggest misconception that you've seen people have when they're talking to you about self-management? They're looking to go to self-management or they're looking to adopt Holacracy. So the biggest misconception.
Yeah, and of course this is different depending on what flavor of self-management or framework we're using for self-management. So the answers might vary a bit, but I'll speak from my experience, which is Holacracy focused, although I think what I'm about to say applies to any approach to self-management that is likely to be and be useful, which is there's two main ones I tend to highlight. The first is people often think self-management means no structure. I get this all the time. Wow, what do you do without structure? Or, this is totally flat. That's another one I hear, flat. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's not classically, a command hierarchy as we're used to, but flat, I think, is a terrible descriptor for a healthy self-managed company in the same way it would be for the human body. right? Like it's not a top-down command hierarchy. There's not a CEO cell bossing the others around, telling them what to do. There's trillions of cells, all with autonomy to do their own inner workings, and yet responsibility to a larger whole. And so the cells are integrated into a larger functioning organ, for example, but not one that violates the autonomy of the cells. The heart's job is not to micromanage the different cells. In fact, it builds on their autonomy, so it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to worry about, well, wait, how are we getting that oxygen into that blood right there? No, it's like that's the blood cells, deal with that, right? Whatever. It gets to figure out the higher level function. So the human body's highly structured. It's not classically structured in a top-down command hierarchy the way we're used to in companies, but it's highly, highly structured. And a healthy self-managed company is more structured, not less than a management hierarchy, more structured. If anything, management hierarchies would be better described as flat than a healthy self-managed company, at least in practice. You might have an org chart on paper, but how many times in traditional companies do you see giant meetings where everything gets discussed to death because it's not clear who owns this, who's going to make the decision, where does power lie here, right? So that lack of clarity leads to what feels often more flat, like everybody's got a voice, but God, nothing can get done, and it's also what I call the tyranny of consensus, where everyone's got a voice, but nothing can get done. And that happens more in, traditional management hierarchies. But, so one, don't think this means not structured. It does mean a very different kind of structure. It means a more agile structure, a structure more like the human body, and a related one is, people often assume that it's somehow more like decisions are made by groups with consensus, which again applies more to management hierarchy than it does to a healthy self-managed company where power is distributed, it's decentralized. It's, when I'm in a self-managed environment, I know exactly what's mine to lead and what's not, and where the boundaries are. And my leadership doesn't presume some kind of top-down hierarchical thing of I can boss anyone around, right? I know the role relationships. I know this other person fills these roles and they have these decision rights and I have those decision rights. And here is the intersection and here's how we change all of that. So it's not consensus-based. It's not big groups making decisions when done healthy. And it's certainly not structureless. It's highly structured, just very dynamically structured. It's evolving, it's living structure, and it's decentralized structure that doesn't require everything to flow up in the way it does in a management hierarchy. And another one I might mention is it's often a common misconception that the point is for the egalitarian, structure and benefit. And I think any organization that adopts self-management, primarily with the goal being, let's get more egalitarian, let's give everyone more voice and make this more egalitarian, is setting themselves up for all sorts of trouble. And now the irony is the companies in now that are self-managed, you could describe them as quite egalitarian, and that's true. But it's not the goal. When it becomes the goal, we have a problem. It's very similar to happiness. Pursuing happiness, I think, is a trap. Happiness ensues. It does not work well when pursued. In other words, we can create the conditions where we can do meaningful work and feel joy, and those things very often lead to happiness. But when we chase happiness, it can become narcissistic and inward focused. And the same is true at a collective level. When we pursue and chase egalitarian, let's give everyone a voice for the sake of helping everyone feel good by having a voice. It becomes very quickly inward focused and narcissistic, and it sabotages the very ground you're going for. But when we pursue, let's do meaningful work together, right? Let's pursue a purpose here that we can all get behind, serving. Now it pulls us into devotional service, which is not the same as how do I get to be happy? How do I get to have a voice, right? When I'm parenting, I have a daughter, when I'm parenting, right? My goal isn't, well, how do I use my child so that I can be as happy as possible, in life? Parenting is deeply joyful for me, but it's not because I'm using my child for my happiness. It's because I have a higher purpose that is not about me, and that I'm in devotional service to. And God, there's so much meaning in that and so much joy in that, so watch out for the trap of chasing the egalitarian. Don't make it the goal. Make the goal serving a purpose. And if what serves that purpose best, I tell this to clients all the time when they're adopting Holacracy, what serves us best is to throw out the self-management thing and go back to a command hierarchy. I'll be the first one to advocate for that, right? The goal is the purpose. And if management hierarchy serves it better, do management hierarchy. Now, rarely do I find that actually serves it better once you account for a learning curve and if the learning curve makes sense to pay, right? But if it does, great. The goal isn't the tool. The goal isn't egalitarian.
Thank you very much.
I think
Brian.
we saw that a lot. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Don.
just thank you very much, Brian. A lot there for me to digest and noodle on, and a lot of insight built into that. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be easy to get focused on process rather than outcome. It's very tempting because it's familiar and safe.
Yeah.
I want to pause on asking or allowing a few more questions really quick. I just saw that Olivier joined, and I hate to put him on the spot, but I think it'd be great to get his intro, if we don't mind.
He did say early that he's got his daughter watching Toy Story in the background, so I don't know if he's going to be available. We'll see.
Well, yeah. So he's currently running your company. If he pops up and wants to say something, but I know Toy Story is no problem, Olivier. But glad you could join us anyway. Feel free to pop in any thoughts on chat, and thanks for being here. Well, then we'll move on to Matthew has a question, who's actually our speaker for next month. So. Nice to see you, Matthew.
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Thanks, Kat and Don. We all know sort of the general territory we're covering here, but there's so many people who don't have any idea about this. And so one thing we wrestle with is how do we brand this to the total neophyte? People know what hierarchy is. And that's kind of the almost organic default. And most people are thinking in duopolies, right? There's Ford and Chevy. There's Coke and Pepsi, there's, NFL and MLB, whatever. What can we do that is the counterweight to hierarchy?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to do here is surprise people by challenging maybe their default assumptions when they first hear this is a management framework or whatever it doesn't rely on top-down command hierarchy. And I will often start with that, but there's a trap in defining it by what it's not, right? Like, because then not only, does that not tell you necessarily what it is, but it can set it up as, somehow oppositional or which I find is kind of a natural way of differentiating from something, but actually then becomes a turnoff or an obstacle for people sometimes. So the first thing I'll say is watch out for traps like that one, and anything that's too zealot focused, right? That's too this is the best, can be such a turnoff for people trying to learn this, right? But I'll often surprise them with things like I said earlier, is more structured, not less, right? Which then I'm almost giving their brain things that don't seem to fit together. It doesn't use a top-down command hierarchy, but it's more structured, not less, right? Doesn't use a top-down command hierarchy, but it's actually more autocratic than a management hierarchy, which is true. It's just a decentralized autocratic system. It's people know what is theirs to lead and decide without having to check with everyone. So it is in a lot of ways more autocratic, just with more people. So things like this that set up almost a brain teaser of well, wait a minute, I would assume one thing when I hear it, doesn't have a top-down command hierarchy, but then here are these other things that conflict with what I would assume, that kind of snap people into a way of kind of getting it in some way. Or another one that I'm fond of is something around. On
that last one, Brian, would you call that modular? Would you think of it in terms of modularity, like these, maybe even the roles are modular, or some other pieces that put together form the system?
Yeah, you can. I usually don't go there as one of my go-to explanations, but it works. You could. Okay. Yeah, I sometimes I'll talk about more adaptive, more it evolves. It's agile. The structure is living and changing and all that. Sometimes I'll talk about I fill a dozen different roles in each of the companies I'm involved in. And so do other people, and we're all kind of the CEO of our role. We all have a lot of authority and power, and yet we know the limits of that, and we have a process for evolving all that. So I'll talk about that kind of thing. Sometimes I like to use this little thing, especially when I find somebody that has a bit of a bias against management hierarchy. It's funny, as somebody who obviously has been deep in the self-management space for decades and pioneered a major system, I am probably one of the bigger advocates of management hierarchy from everyone I connect with and teach in this space. And it's partly, until you really like learn to love something and see the beauty in it, and then it's hard to transcend it. Right? There's something you're pushing against and rejecting in it. And more good comes when you're able to really appreciate what it does, as well as its limits. So what I'll often do when I sense a little bias is tell people, you could perfectly recreate management hierarchy within Holacracy, right? For example, I could create a role called manager, name it manager. I could create another role called subordinate. I can give the manager role an accountability for bossing around the subordinate. I can give the subordinate role the accountability for doing whatever the manager says. And then I could set up the policies that says anyone filling the subordinate role can be fired at will by the manager role filler, and the manager role filler gets to determine their pay. Right? I could do that, and that is perfectly valid holacracy practice. Right? You can do that in a way that is fully aligned with the Holacracy Constitution. Now, it would only last as long as it made sense and served the purpose best, because otherwise somebody would bring a proposal and say, well, maybe the manager role shouldn't just be bossing the subordinate around. Maybe we should carve out something the subordinate really should be able to do on their own without, just getting bossed around. And so it would evolve from there. But in that way, I think of Holacracy as simply a larger system. It fully includes management hierarchy. You could perfectly recreate management hierarchy within Holacracy if you wanted to. It just wouldn't make much sense. Right? Because we can do better. We can get better clarity than the simplicity of management hierarchy. And most organizations today are complex enough that better organizational clarity serves them well than just the hack of relying on a simple top-down command hierarchy. But putting it in that frame changes it from a value judgment against management hierarchy to saying like, no, if that works, great, use it. We're not pushing against that. We're not saying there's anything wrong with that. We're saying simply there's probably more effective ways by getting more clarity and giving people more clear decision rights so that less stuff has to get stuck rolling up, or go to a big meeting to get, triaged into some big consensus thing or whatever. But to the extent it makes sense, right? And we still have this, for years, I filled a trainer role in HolacracyOne that, effectively when we were in a training, I had another role there that I could totally boss around. Now, the person filling that role, when we were outside of the training, had a role that basically got to dictate some things to me, and as is the complex messiness of human relating in systems that allow, more nuance, more complexity. That makes sense. We have different roles and different contexts we show up in, So anyway, I do things like that. It's more like a bunch of brain teasers to kind of like give people a sense of what it is and a visceral feel of it in some way, while combating some of the likely biases and misconceptions that come up.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? Are we good to move? Let's go on to Brent. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
I was curious, kind of building on what you were saying about how you treat things differently now after all you've learned, and like less attachment and all that stuff, and maybe like a concrete moment from your life like that really isn't like, oh, I nailed that one. I wouldn't have been like that 15 years ago. And then also on that, like, do you see any limits at Holacracy and where it's at, like, or a next level that you see that's possible that it doesn't allow for emergence or could allow for more emergence in the future?
Yeah, let me answer that one first. Yeah, of course. One of the things I love about Holacracy is it itself is an evolving framework, right? We're on the most recent version, current version of Holacracy is Holacracy 5.0, which refers to the version of the Holacracy Constitution, which is an open source document used by thousands of companies now. So, it's a meta framework. It's not telling you specifically what roles to have in your company or anything like that, so it's not just a one size fits all, do everything this way. It just gives you the meta framework for how to define how your organization works. And that meta framework itself is evolving, right? We're on version 5.0, and I've got a list of tensions that I've already found of like, here are edge cases where I feel like there could be there's a rule that's either in the way or not quite flexible enough or something missing, or whatever. And that's how it evolves, and that's how it has evolved. It's not big design up front kind of thing of trying to figure out how this should work theoretically. It was start somewhere in version 1.0 and, try it and notice, what facilitates smooth flow of work for purpose, smooth coordination, and what gets in the way of it. And of course, there's still, things now, and they're little things where there's like, this is more bureaucratic than it has to be, or less flexible than it needs to be, or more flexible than it is healthy. It's, giving people not enough framework and structure. It's things like that. There's a lot of little things. You can actually find it if you go onto GitHub and search for Holacracy Constitution. It's managed just like open source is, and you'll see people, the whole community of Holacracy practitioners and coaches will submit issues in there of things they think should change in the next version of the Constitution. And, some of those, will be submitted by people who are more novice that don't understand something. Some of them will be pure works of genius. And then we get to sort through and figure out what gets into the next version and what doesn't. But yeah, and so no one big thing or anything. There's just lots of little things I've noticed. Little issues here and there. Like, for example, one of the major ones now that'll probably get integrated into the next version of Holacracy is nowadays, there's the whole AI world. In fact, one of my other companies, GlassFrog, that makes self-management software, is actually not just for self-management. Also, we have a bunch of management hierarchy clients now who want more organizational clarity. But now there's more and more organizations that have autonomous AI agents filling roles. And right now, the current version of the Holacracy Constitution doesn't make that totally clear and easy, right? It presumes, because when it was written, this wasn't possible. So it presumes that roles are filled by humans. And now I've got the last beta release of GlassFrog has the capacity to fill AI agents in roles and have them autonomously execute roles with all the beautiful clarity of what's the authority of their role, what are the limits of their role. If anything, I think Holacracy is almost perfect for a agent-filled organization. But the Constitution itself needs to evolve a little bit to make more clear how does that work. There are things that you can't expect an agent to do yet that you can expect humans to do. And so there's some clarity needed in the next version to make it easier without having to have amendments to the Constitution or a lot of ambiguity of how can you assign a role to an agent and what does that even mean? And so there's things like that, for example. And then your other question was an example of the kind of attachment and just where I am, how I do things differently now, or how I do. When I was a lot younger and earlier in this journey, I would get more attached to the outcomes I was working towards, and in my company and companies, and that would be then like I'd be really driving towards them, and nowadays I still find lots of leadership energy flowing through me towards things, but holding it lighter leaves a lot more space for me to even just attune to others, right? Like when I was younger, I would end up with more situations where somebody would get swept up in my charisma and they would, go with something and be doing something, even in a self-managed environment. I'm not bossing them around, but nonetheless, they're not fully in their own sovereignty. They're not fully in their own hell yes to whatever it is, whatever direction, we're kind of going. Which it was great and efficient for a little bit, but then, later it comes back to bite you when you find out they're actually not completely bought into this. And nowadays, with just less attachment, I find myself really tracking the other. I spend a lot more time just sensing, is this person is this really where they are and what they want to be leading? And if not, that's great. I can still do what I need to do to lead towards stuff, but make more space for them. Even in hiring, I used to try to talk people into joining my company. Now I try to talk them out of it, right? Now anyone I hire, spend some time trying to talk them out of, here's why you might not want to work here. Because if I try and I fail to talk them out of it, they're going in eyes wide open. There's no, selling them on something. They know what it is. They know all of the reasons I think they might not want to take the job. And so if they are still in, it's more of a genuine buy-in. It's more of a, and that you can apply not just to hiring, but to any pitch, any attempt to lead in any direction, right? It's make sure people aren't dropping their own boundaries, dropping themselves by saying yes. This is especially when people are newer to the level of sovereignty and autonomy that self-management allows, right? It is really helpful to just have that extra mindfulness check of, somebody that's more used to it, just doing a little bit more checking and verifying and feeling, where are you? I don't know, just one little example.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Next, Charlie.
This is, I think, a little related. I find the way you're talking about attachment and letting go beautiful, insightful, and knowledgeable. And there's a tactic, or they're like, I want to just give you the space to get into the minutia of how to get better at that, and or how to help other people get better at that, if that is even, if that's even advisable.
Yeah. It certainly, if they want to get better at that, right? If they're called to do that and willing participant, if it's coming from your own attachment for them to get better at being unattached, then you might want to start with yourself there. But yeah, I have quite a bit of skill with that. This is the main work I do now, is spiritual work with people. It's my current calling, and I run an organization, building an organization now around that. Yeah, so it's a very different work than most of, even a lot of, like, there's a great Ram Dass quote, if you know who he is, where he talks about, he used to be a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist. I forget. I think a psychiatrist. I forget which. Anyway, he talked about how now, as in his spiritual work he does, he finds the old version of him would try to help people figure out how to fix their problems, how to change something to get out of their neuroses or whatever. And now what he does is help people stop trying to do that and instead just love what is. So the way I do that work, when there is an attachment there, it's almost like a muscle clenched, right? And if you ever read or seen anything, I for a while I dated somebody that had a missing limb, and learned a lot about that in, that year. And when people have a missing limb, like say a missing hand, for example, there's often this phantom limb pain they get, like really bad pain in a hand that doesn't exist. And the main treatment for it, I find fascinating. It's a mirrored box. So there is a box with two handholds you can put in, and a mirror thing. So what it makes it look like, you put your good hand in, and it mirrors it. So it looks like you have another hand there still when you look. It looks like you've got two. And then they have you clench both hands, the real one and the missing one. And your eyes are visually seeing the two clench. And you clench them so hard that it hurts. And then when it's clenched really, really tight and you can feel the clench, then you release. And with that, it releases all the phantom limb pain in the one, because your brain's sending the signal to release. And you can use this metaphor not just for physical pain, but for the pain of an attachment. So what I tend to do when I'm helping work with people on their attachments is I'm tracking, where is there a clench? Where is there a, something contracted, something that feels like needy, ungrounded? Clues are, they're going for something, and it feels like they are not going to be okay if they don't get that thing, right? There's a neediness in it. It often feels a little younger. There's a clench, a contraction. And just like that mirror box, first I want them to feel the contraction. So instead of trying to help them solve something in the outside world to get rid of it, which is often the mistaken goal, it's like, let me change something to get out of the clench, right? Which is actually, even if you succeed at it, it reinforces, see, you better have been really afraid of that and clench. And it deepens the attachment, even when you succeed at changing the external environment to get out of it. Instead, call their awareness to it. What's going on in you right now? What are you feeling right now? There is like sensing a sense of almost like desperate, this needs to happen. What if it doesn't, right? So I want them to fully feel the clench, and then I want to model the release for them, right? I want to first get them to notice that there is something they're clenching there. There's an attachment, there's a neediness, and then take them into feeling the release of it. And often I do that counterintuitively by saying something like, well, that thing that seems so important, you might not. Or sometimes, I'll see it recently at one where somebody was super anxious that they were going to get rejected from community, from, something. And I felt the clench, and I looked at him and said, we might all here reject you. It might happen, right? Feel that, feel what it feels like. Then what, right? And what I'm doing is taking them into a sense of, oh, and I'm still okay. Like, oh, that would suck, but I can hold myself in that grief, right? I'm still okay. And that's the release. Like, can I take them into feeling it's okay if it never changes, right? And the more practice and cycles you get at that, helping feel the clench, feel what the release feels like, right? Especially it's got to be an embodied thing. It's not just a mental thing. And they've got to feel it in their body, feel the release. That kind of work makes it so much easier.
It's almost like corporate mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a next step. It's not just mindfulness. It's now what's the work of actually releasing the clench and the attachments. Mindfulness, starting point. You got to be aware of it first,
Sure.
But often the awareness will still lead to somebody then trying to, change everything in the environment. And the irony is when you do that work and you release the attachments, you don't stop changing things in your environment. You're just doing it from different ground. Now, instead of it being a needy, I have to, it's play. It's like, I don't need to do anything, but this is what wants to flow through me. This body mind is still built to do something. If we don't have attachment and we just sit around, eventually we will get hungry and we'll probably feel inspired to go get food. And the same is true of work. Eventually we're going to get inspired to go do something. And it's so much more powerful when work flows from inspiration and joy than clench and fear,
Sort of radical acceptance.
Yeah.
As a starting point. Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, Dom, what's up?
Kat, you had your no, that's great. That sounds like corporate, like ACT actually. But you had your hand up. I don't know if you put it down on purpose or not. Do you want to go? Or?
Either way, I can talk after you too. I was just gonna.
Sure, okay.
Go ahead.
I'll just go real quick. So
Sure.
Brian, and now we're getting this has been wonderful. Getting a little bit later. So what happens after you remove the boss?
Hey, yeah. So. Well, there's many ways I can answer that. One is, we've removed the boss from a conventional frame, but we haven't removed the idea of somebody having authority and, somebody leading something. If anything, we've freed there to be room for more of it. It's, again, another way I could say it is self-managed companies may have less traditional managers or roles that are just manager. But if anything, more management. It's not about getting rid of management. It's not about getting rid of power. It's actually about raising power throughout the whole system, right? It's allowing there to be more power that more people can find and use and enact on. So if anything, you're freeing there to be room for far more bosses. Like I said, everyone's like the CEO of their role, right? Which is what I want when I'm building a company. I want a bunch of business partners that are all leading, that are not like looking to be told what to do, but that are saying, no, this is my piece of the system. And I'm going to make it the best piece of the system I can. And I'm not going to be chasing pleasing a boss. I'm going to be chasing doing really good work that I feel proud of because I care, So if anything, you get rid of the, traditional management hierarchy status kind of boss thing, and you make more room in the right structure. It doesn't happen if you just say no more bosses. That, by the way, doesn't get you very far. Some people get a mistaken idea and do self-management by saying, great, everyone, no more bosses, you're empowered. And you don't get an empowered team. You get a lot of confused people trying to figure out, wait, how do things work around here? But when you have the right framework in place and you get rid of that like single point boss, what you do is leave room for a lot more people to step up and lead, a lot more people to find and use real power.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Do we have time for one more, Dom, or do we need to do closing?
I think we have enough time if you want to go. Yeah.
Anybody else have anything before I just want to make sure that there's enough space for anybody else attending? If not, I would love to leave on a wow moment. Like, what is your favorite, when you look back over all this time you spent thinking about this stuff, what is the moment where you're like, that was so cool? That was amazing. I wasn't expecting that to happen, or wasn't expecting to be so big or impactful. There's got to be a couple in there. And I'd love to know, what do you love about the path you've walked? Hello?
You're asking everybody else, right? Not me.
No,
Or you're
I'm asking you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were doing a closing thing.
No, I was seeing if anybody else had another question before, but if we don't, then I'd love to end on this. Like,
Yeah.
what's your? I'm so glad I took this path, even as hard as
Oh,
it
yeah.
was, or the questions that I had, or the times I questioned it. That's fine. We've gone over that. But what's the biggest, so much joy from that?
Yeah. For me, it's what happened on the other side of this. I gave a talk at the Integral European Conference, last year, I think, and I was on my just journey from Holacracy to kind of what I'm doing now. And one of the things I got to talk a lot about and shared there is, I was so surprised to see how much the more my path in my work was all about individual sovereignty, right? Deepening us into our own sovereignty, our own power, the freedom to have an environment to do that, freedom, sovereignty, power, all of these. And what I found is the other side of that coin, which is love, right? Which is the more we are fully standing in our sovereignty, our power, our freedom, right? There's nothing anymore that is outside of us. There's nothing to fight. There's nothing to get. And the heart can just naturally open. My biggest wow moment is how much of this journey with Holacracy became a deeply spiritual path for me towards, when I'm standing in that level of sovereignty, right? There is no need for rejection anymore. I trust myself to adapt to whatever comes my way. The deeper I learn sovereignty, the deeper I learn to open my heart and find how to bring more beauty and love into the world, into the companies I serve. The more it went from, we got a goal to pursue with, from all the attachments to that to just devotional service. Now the organizations I'm involved in, the people I support, it's all coming from love. It's all coming from devotion. And man, I didn't expect the study of sovereignty and freedom to lead there. Now it makes complete sense to me, of course, but my biggest wow is the stealth spiritual practice that Holacracy became for me, and where it took me in my own journey with my heart.
That's great. That's a nice one to end on. Thank you. So I think we've got 10 minutes left. Does anybody else have anything really quick before we just do a wrap and share any comments on what you heard today? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Oh, Brent still has one. Look, thanks, Brent.
Since we got time, Brian, you've kind of alluded with your change in perspective and bringing it to your own personal life and all that stuff, with your daughter. And it makes me curious about where the line stops between the organization, so the organization that's operating Holacracy, let's say, and then community, right? So all those families that are involved in a company like that. And then how can it, or what have you seen, or do you see in the future for extending beyond the walls of the organization?
Yeah. So one thing I'd say is we have to be careful when we get into that domain to what are we governing? I think the challenge is it's easy to think we are governing the people when we move into the community realm. And I think that's actually a trap. Holacracy is meant for governing an organization. And now many communities also have effectively an organization to them, whether or not it's explicitly acknowledged. There's still work to do. There's, coordinating whatever events the community has, or I can make this concrete. I run a community now. I run a spiritual organization that has a whole community of people around it. And we have events 3 or 4 times a month. And so there's an organization there. There's an organization, Lejwe Sangha, it's called. And that organization has roles and has functions, has work to do. And it's very community governed, but we're not governing the community. We're governing the work and structure and processes of the organization. And the organization that then facilitates and creates space for community and also controls things like what's the process if somebody needs to be removed or uninvited from the community events and all that. And then we have members of this organization. It's a nonprofit. There's members, and those members effectively govern it by filling roles as a Holacracy-powered organization. So it's a really interesting way of a community, still that is a community, and yet having this beautiful governance frame. And we've seen it play out. Like we've had a couple of cases where we did need to exclude somebody from the community. We had one case where somebody, there was a big thing between two people, big thing. And of course it involved romance and sex, and those things happen in communities and often trigger some shit. But we had such a beautiful defined process now for how does that engage, and everyone trusted it more because it wasn't just one guy organizing it that's using his whim to decide, should I exclude this person or this other person or whatever. There's a whole beautiful process filled by many volunteers in a role and in a process that's transparent, and people can bring proposals to change. So I love what it's doing to this community to have this organization that's self-managed that they can be part of governing. And in another case, that process was so clear and transparent, and we borrowed a lot from the firing processes I've used in organizations before for this one, which tend to work really well. We had somebody that did get excluded. There's some shadow stuff going on, but as we excluded him, we did called a 4-hour-long thing specifically to give him support with the thing that was getting him excluded from volunteers in the community who wanted to help him. And it was delivered with so much love and heart. I cried with him as I shared the news. It was my role to share the news. And he said, it's amazing. I know I'm excluded, but I don't feel rejected. And he's been messaging me months ago. And I said, it was so grateful. It was one of the most useful things that happened to him because of the way it was held. Right. And that whole way we enacted it is partly because of Holacracy. It's not entirely that. It's also the people involved. But Holacracy gave us this framework where it could be clear. There was a clear process. There was clear norms and standards and a governance structure. So it kind of depersonalized it a lot, and it let me show up in my role in it of like, look, I'm here in service. I have an organization to serve. And unfortunately right now that means I have to draw a boundary here, but I can draw that boundary with love. And I can draw that boundary in service to the person who's on the other side of it as well. And I just love what it's doing for the community.
That's great. I love that. So we have 5 minutes left really quick. I know in our messages, you had talked about the self-management accelerator. So can you give us one soundbite on that? And then we'll wrap up. Dennis, if you want to put your message in the chat or your question in the chat, we'll see if we can sneak that in there too. Cool.
So at holacracy.org, there is this thing called the Self-Management Accelerator, which is it's a combination of there's forums in there, discussion forums, things like that. There's some resources, videos. There's a free version. There's a paid version. Paid version has a bunch of trainings and content. Some of it is stuff that HolacracyOne's created with me, but others as well. We have a whole network of Holacracy coaches that can submit, courses and all that into that platform. So, it's a whole platform for the whole self-management movement. It's not just Holacracy centric. You'll get wisdom from Holacracy in there. You'll get a lot of Holacracy coaches in there, but it's intentionally not trying to be just Holacracy. So any form of self-management, just whatever works. But yeah, it's a great platform, great tools. Check it out.
Great.
Oh. And I just saw Dennis's question. Do we have
that one in? Great. Then we'll just wrap up. Thanks, Dennis. Go ahead, Brian. How do you view the role of source in frameworks like Holacracy? Do you think it's a useful perspective?
Yeah. So the concept, if people aren't familiar, is source more like founder. Somebody that is kind of channeling something into the world. The source of this material. I have a kind of mixed relationship on this. I've found it really dangerous to ignore, right? If you try to just assume that, everyone's just role fillers, and you don't leave room for, wait, there is a difference between somebody that is creating this thing from nothing, right? There is something in that act and that channeling of something new into the world that there is a difference there. Ignoring that difference, ignore it at your own peril. And the trap on the other side, though, is getting too stuck in it as that's fundamental and it can never be anything else and no one else can ever be that, that also feels like too rigid, and it can get in the way. I look at it more of like, yes, as the source of something, it is, let's take parenting as a metaphor, and it probably not the healthiest parenting move to say, well, yes, I know I'm the source and I created this thing, but hey, I don't want to have a special role here and I want to be an adult. If it's 2, or 4 or 10, you probably don't want to go to it doesn't need source to be anything special. That's probably not effective. But at the same time, if they still need source to be something super special when they're 30, you may have missed a step in your parenting, right? Like the goal is to raise them to not need the role of parents. There can still be the beautiful history and the connection, but my God, I hope in 20 more years, my daughter doesn't need me, right? Doesn't still want to support her and all that, but I want to raise her to be so autonomous and sovereign and self-sufficient that she can be her own source then, and everyone in her world connected to her can offer her whatever they have to channel. And I want the same for the organizations I build. I don't want to ignore my special role as founder, but at the same time, I don't want to encode it as something that has to be there completely forever. I want to build the organization in a way that allows more and more and more people to find their own way of channeling their own magic into it, while recognizing that that's a gradual process over time, and it takes a lot to build the structures and frameworks to get there, just like children.
Okay. On that note, I think this is a great place to wrap up this week. Thanks everybody for joining. We keep a recording. We send out the summary. We give links to our YouTube page where we post the recordings. Join us next month with Matt, who's going to talk about the teal landscape report, sort of a culmination of all the things that we know right now going on in the self-management and teal world. Brian, thank you so much. This was great. We really enjoyed hearing from you, and wonderful flow in the conversation with everyone too. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you in September.
Bye. Thanks everyone.
Goodbye.
Hi, thanks.
Thanks, Brian.